A flight attendant insults an elderly woman. Then the CEO of the airline stands up. In seat 22B, Martha Turner, a frail 78-year-old woman with silver hair, settled into her chair, adjusting her seatbelt with careful hands. She had flown with this airline countless times and always enjoyed the friendly service. But this time, something was different. The flight attendant, a young woman named Emily, had been serving drinks to passengers, moving down the aisle with practiced ease. When she reached Martha's seat, the older woman politely asked for a cup of water. Emily gave her a cold look, as if the request were a nuisance. Without a word, she handed the water to Martha, but not without an eye roll and a condescending smile. Martha, taken aback, tried to brush it off, but Emily's attitude didn't stop there. As the flight went on, the young flight attendant's behavior grew more dismissive. She ignored Martha's request for a blanket, loudly sighed when Martha asked for assistance with the overhead compartment, and rolled her eyes every time Martha spoke. The other passengers noticed the tension, but no one spoke up. Everyone on the plane seemed either too distracted or too uncomfortable to say anything. But Martha was an elderly woman. How could she fight back against such blatant disrespect? Then, things took a turn. As Emily passed by again, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Martha to hear, "You'd think they would have more manners at that age." Martha's face flushed, and she gripped the armrest of her seat, feeling the sting of the insult. It wasn't just the rude behavior, it was the judgment, the disrespect for someone who had lived through so much. As the flight continued, the tension in the cabin simmered, but no one spoke up. Martha sat quietly, her eyes cast down, gripping the armrests tightly, trying to ignore the harsh words and the cold treatment she had received. She had been through enough in her life, and this was not how she imagined spending her flight. Emily continued to walk the aisle, ignoring Martha completely. But just as Martha settled into an uneasy silence, the plane's intercom crackled to life, breaking the quiet hum of the cabin. "Good afternoon, passengers," came the calm, professional voice of the pilot. "This is your captain speaking. We'd like to thank you for flying with us today. We hope you're all comfortable, and as always, feel free to reach out to our crew for assistance." No one paid much attention to the captain's words, but then came the unexpected announcement. "I'd like to take a moment to personally thank all of you for being such a great group of passengers today, and I'd like to introduce someone special aboard with us. We have the CEO of our airline on this flight today, and I'm sure many of you would appreciate his presence." The entire cabin went silent. Passengers looked around. Whispers spread across the aisle. The CEO on this flight. As everyone tried to process the surprising news, the intercom clicked off, and a few moments later, a tall man in a sharp suit stood up at the front of the plane. His presence immediately commanded attention, his calm demeanor radiating authority. It was none other than William Harris, the CEO of the airline. William's voice rang out, clear and firm. "I just wanted to take a moment to personally thank all of you for choosing our airline today. It's not every day I get to fly with our customers, and I think it's important to hear from you." As he walked down the aisle, passengers stared, some murmuring excitedly, while others simply watched, unsure of what was about to unfold. And then, he reached Martha. To everyone's surprise, William stopped in front of Martha's seat. He looked at her with a gentle, welcoming smile before nodding respectfully. "I noticed you've been quiet today, madam. Is everything all right?" Martha, still feeling the sting of the earlier insult, blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected someone so important to pay any attention to her. She took a deep breath, and though hesitant, spoke up, her voice shaking. "Well, honestly, I've had a difficult time. I've been treated poorly by one of your crew members." The CEO's expression immediately shifted. He didn't just look concerned, he looked angry. "You've been mistreated?" he asked, his voice now laced with sincerity. "By one of my team members?" Martha nodded slowly, pointing toward Emily, who was standing at the back of the plane, now looking uncomfortable. The entire cabin was suddenly focused on the interaction, the tension palpable in the air. William's gaze locked onto Emily, his expression hardening. "Emily!" he called firmly, his voice carrying across the plane. Emily froze. Martha had never expected anything like this. She had simply wanted to be left alone, to enjoy her flight. But now, everything had changed. The CEO had just taken her side in front of everyone. Emily slowly walked forward, her eyes downcast, avoiding the gaze of both the CEO and the passengers. Her arrogant attitude had faded, replaced by a mix of nervousness and guilt. William turned to Martha, his voice soft and apologetic. "I'm truly sorry you had to experience that. It's unacceptable. We work hard to ensure that our passengers feel comfortable and respected." He turned to Emily, his voice turning sharp. "This will be dealt with immediately." The entire cabin was silent as William turned and gave Emily one last look. She lowered her head in shame, unable to meet his eyes. With a final nod to Martha, William spoke once more, his tone firm yet compassionate. "Martha, I assure you that you'll never face such treatment again with us. This is my personal promise to you." As William returned to his seat, the entire cabin sat in stunned silence. Emily, clearly rattled, disappeared to the back. The weight of the CEO's words had struck the entire flight. The passengers exchanged glances, a sense of awe and respect settling over them. In that moment, they knew that this wasn't just about a flight. It was about something much bigger, standing up for what was right. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension as William Harris returned to his seat. Passengers exchanged glances, clearly aware that something significant had just happened. No one had expected such a public display of authority, especially not in the middle of a routine flight. But the CEO's actions left a lasting impact, and the story of what had just unfolded began to spread quickly among the passengers. Martha sat back in her seat, still in shock. She had expected nothing more than a polite apology, maybe a small gesture to ease the discomfort. But this, she had never imagined the CEO would step in like this. His words, the sincerity in his voice, had been more than just an apology. They had been a promise that she would never again face disrespect. As the flight continued, Sarah, a fellow passenger who had been sitting nearby, leaned over and whispered to Martha. "That was amazing," she said, still in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like it. You just got the CEO to back you up." Martha managed a small smile. "I didn't do anything. I just spoke the truth." Sarah nodded. "Well, you sure got everyone's attention." Emily looked terrified. "I bet she won't forget this anytime soon." Back near the front of the plane, Emily stood in the galley, trying her best to avoid eye contact with anyone. Her hands trembled slightly as she refilled drinks, her mind racing. The CEO's words had shaken her deeply, but it wasn't just the reprimand. It was the realization that she had embarrassed herself in front of an entire plane full of people, including the person she'd treated so poorly. She knew she had crossed a line, and now she was paying the price. As the plane neared its destination, Emily could feel the eyes of the passengers on her, their gaze filled with a mix of judgment and disbelief. She had tried to maintain the appearance of professionalism, but there was no hiding her guilt. When the plane finally landed, the tension in the air was palpable. As the passengers began to disembark, many of them nodded in Martha's direction, offering words of support. But for Emily, the reality of her actions set in. She had always taken her position for granted, never once considering how her words or actions might affect others. Now, she was facing the consequences of her behavior in a way she could never have predicted. Later that day, William Harris released a statement on the airline's social media accounts, publicly addressing the incident. The post was short but powerful. "At our airline, we value respect, dignity, and kindness above all else. No passenger should ever feel disrespected or ignored. We are committed to providing the best service to everyone who flies with us, regardless of their age, background, or any other factor. This will be addressed appropriately within our team." Martha saw the statement later that evening, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. The CEO had not only taken her side, but he had made it clear that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated. And as for Emily, she was called into the office the next day for a serious meeting. The consequences were clear. Her behavior had cost her more than just her reputation. It had cost her job. Emily would no longer be a part of the team. Her actions had gone against everything the airline stood for. As the days passed, the story of Martha and the CEO's intervention spread far beyond the confines of the flight. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like, "CEO stands up for elderly woman after disrespectful flight attendant incident," and "Airline CEO defends passenger, ensures accountability." Social media was flooded with praise for the CEO's quick action, while people shared their own stories of mistreatment by airline staff. Martha became an unexpected symbol of standing up for oneself, especially for those who had been overlooked or disrespected. In the days following the incident, Martha's phone rang constantly. Calls of support poured in from friends, family, and even strangers. Many wanted to hear her side of the story, to know how she felt after being treated so poorly and then witnessing such a dramatic turnaround. For Martha, it was overwhelming at first, but she quickly grew accustomed to the attention. Still, she kept her responses short and sweet. Her primary focus was on the respect she had gained. The CEO, William Harris, sent Martha a personal letter, expressing his gratitude for her patience and her grace under pressure. He apologized once more for the way she had been treated and assured her that changes were being made to ensure no passenger would ever experience such behavior again. His words gave Martha a sense of peace. When Emily's departure from the airline became public, many passengers took to social media to express their disappointment, not at the decision itself, but at how Emily's actions had been allowed to escalate to that point. Martha, however, chose to focus on the positive outcome, the fact that she had stood up for herself and, in doing so, had sparked a larger conversation about respect and dignity in public spaces. Martha's story continued to inspire people all over the world, and soon she found herself invited to speak at various community events, sharing her experience and encouraging others to stand up for their rights. Her message resonated deeply with older adults, those who often feel invisible or unheard in a society that values youth and productivity over experience and wisdom. Meanwhile, the airline's reputation soared. People admired the way William Harris handled the situation, proving that leadership and accountability can make a real difference. The airline even launched a new customer service initiative with a focus on empathy, respect, and professional conduct, ensuring that every passenger was treated with dignity, regardless of their age, gender, or background. Martha had never imagined that her simple request for a glass of water would lead to such an incredible chain of events. But the experience had left her feeling empowered, and she realized that sometimes standing up for yourself in the face of injustice could create ripples of change that affected not just one person, but an entire community. As weeks passed, Martha's story continued to gain momentum. The airline's customer service initiative became a model for other companies, and many took note of how quickly the CEO had responded to the situation. Martha, who had once been an overlooked passenger, was now seen as a beacon of resilience and strength. Her story was featured in local newspapers, and eventually, even major news outlets picked it up, broadcasting her experience as an example of standing up against injustice. Martha, however, was not looking for fame or attention. What she had experienced was more than just about her. It was about every person who had ever been ignored or mistreated because of their age or appearance. Martha began to receive messages from people of all ages, especially from the elderly, sharing their own stories of being treated unfairly. Many expressed gratitude for her courage in speaking out. The outpouring of support overwhelmed her, but it also made her realize the far-reaching impact of her simple act of standing up. Meanwhile, the airline continued to build on the lessons learned from the incident. William Harris, the CEO, spoke openly in interviews about the changes being made, focusing on a culture of respect, not just for customers, but for employees as well. The airline's decision to create a more empathetic and customer-focused environment set a new standard in the industry, and it wasn't long before other airlines followed suit, realizing the importance of respect and kindness in the service industry. For Emily, the former flight attendant, the consequences of her actions were far-reaching. She had left the airline, and though many had criticized her behavior, it was clear that she had learned a valuable lesson in empathy and professionalism. Emily issued a public apology to Martha, acknowledging her wrongdoing and expressing regret for her behavior. Martha, in turn, accepted the apology, understanding that growth comes through learning from one's mistakes. Martha's newfound purpose led her to become an advocate for senior citizens, using her platform to raise awareness about the mistreatment and challenges they face. She worked with local organizations to ensure that older adults were treated with the respect they deserved and that their voices were heard. She shared her journey, speaking at senior citizen events, schools, and community gatherings, urging others to stand up for what's right, just as she had. In the end, Martha realized that what started as a simple, uncomfortable moment on a flight had turned into a life-changing experience, not just for her, but for everyone who had been touched by her story. The ripple effect of her courage and the CEO's leadership had sparked a movement, one where kindness and respect were put above all else.